Before we get started, I certainly want to thank you for joining us here today. I know the current conditions around the world have presented unimaginable challenges for us to navigate. So I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your life and your schedule to be with us here today. So welcome to our special webinar, BC Law Waitlist, What You Need to Know. I'm going to be your host, Sean McShay. I'm the Assistant Dean for Graduate Enrollment Management at Boston College Law School. And just a little bit about me, I'm a native of Washington, D.C. I have served as a resource for students looking to pursue a legal education for just about 20 years. And I've served in several markets spanning from Virginia, now here to Massachusetts. So joining me here today are members of the Admissions and Financial Aid team. I have a few current students here as well. And if you don't mind, for the Admissions and Financial Aid team, please take a moment to say hello. And Kim, if you'll go ahead and get us started, I'd appreciate it.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Dean McShay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kim Gardner. I am the Director of Admissions at BC Law. I've been at BC for a number of years and about 18 years in law school admissions. Before that, I actually was a recruiting manager in our career services office. So I kind of know that piece of it. And I also have been in financial aid, both at BC and several other Boston institutions. I'm a New England native. I come from Rhode Island, but I've been in Massachusetts. And right now I'm sitting in Boston. It's sunny. It's about 80 degrees. No, kidding. And no, it's sunny today. It's beautiful. And thank you for joining us. Let's see. How about Daniel?
Sure, Kim. Thank you, Kim, for introducing me. And my name is Daniel. And as the Assistant Director of Admissions and Financial Aid, along with Enrollment Analytics, really, I'll echo everyone. It's really a pleasure to have you here today. And thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to watch. And I hope it will be a benefit to everyone here.
Awesome. Amanda?
Hi, thank you. And welcome, everyone. It's so nice of you all to join us. My name is Amanda, and I am the Assistant Director for Admissions and Financial Aid and Data Analytics.
Thank you, Amanda. Laura?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laura Timmerman. I am the Assistant Director of Admissions and Financial Aid, and I have been at Boston College Law School for about 3.5 years now. Wish we could all meet in person, but I hope you enjoy our virtual event today.
Thank you. Samir?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Samir. I'm an admissions coordinator here in the Admissions and Financial Aid office. I've been a part of the BC community for a little bit over 5 years, 4 as an undergraduate student, and then a little bit over a year here in the admissions office. So welcome, everyone.
Thank you. And helping us out in the chat room today, we have 2 of our students, both Buki and John. Say hello, guys.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining.
Awesome. Thank you. And again, thank you all for joining us. If you're just coming into the room, this is the BC Law Waitlist, What You Need to Know. First, I just want to go through a couple of ground rules. While you may be able to see and hear me and other members of the panel, we cannot see and or hear you. Members of the Admissions and Financial Aid team will respond to questions using the Q&A function of the Zoom platform, and our current students are available to interact with you throughout the chat. Both of those tools, if you're on a laptop or a desktop, both of those tools are at the bottom of your screen in the Zoom platform. For today's webinar, I will lead with a bit of an overview and just a few more details, and then Kim will join at various parts of the discussion. After Kim's discussion points, we will open the floor for Q&A. And I do want to remind you that this session is being recorded, and we do plan to send that out to you after we are done. So you'll have access to this information, so don't worry about that. All right, so in getting started, before I jump into the heart of the waiting list, I want to talk to you a little bit about the national landscape. I'm sure for many of you, it will come as no surprise, given what you may have heard, that application volumes are high across the board. Nationwide, we are seeing over a 30% increase in applications, and that's on top of the increase that we saw in last year's and over the last couple of years. And so how does that affect a candidate who is applying to law schools, a candidate who may be on the waiting list? And depending upon the market, depending upon the institution, it could have a direct impact. Most certainly, it will increase the competitiveness of the process. And in addition to seeing a larger volume of applications in the pool, we're also seeing students perform a little stronger on their entrance exams, both the LSAT and GRE and other scores that are out there. And so I wanted to put that out there for you just to be familiar with so that you understand kind of the landscape that we are navigating right now. And specifically here at BC, we too are seeing a sizable increase in our applicant pool. But we also know that there are other factors, other variables that can play into this decision-making process. And certainly the pandemic has not made it easy on either side of the table. Yes, we can still operate and navigate through applications. It's an electronic process. We can pick it up and do it anywhere. But there are still other variables associated with that. There is the mode of education. And while BC is currently operating under a hybrid model, we are giving every student right now the option of being completely remote if that is what they need at this particular time. Now, whether that will be the case next year, I don't have a crystal ball, so I can't say that the next cycle, what we will be doing in the next cycle, but I do know that we've operated in this hybrid capacity and we've done it well. We've been able to still capture community. We've been able to still carry out all of our functions. And so I wanted to let you know that things that are happening with the pandemic is still a consideration. And I know it will still impact some of the decisions that you will make as well. But in addition to the health crisis that we are experiencing, there are also global, weather issues that are happening out there. And so certainly our hearts and our thoughts are going out to those who are experiencing these severe challenges with weather. But again, all of these things can have a direct impact on the decisions and the opportunities that are available in the coming months. So I wanted to acknowledge that before kind of jumping into the meat of this discussion. And so, let me jump into the overview. So you've hit the submit button and your application goes through the process. Well, who's reading these files and how do they play? How does it play out in this cycle? Our admissions committee, as with many institutions, ours is pretty dynamic, but understand that it can be different across the country. Here, we take a holistic approach in evaluating applications, and the volume of our admissions committee, it expands and contracts depending upon where we are in the cycle. We can be as little as 3 members on the admissions committee or as many as about 18 or 19 members. Depending upon the time of the year. Right now, we have our full admissions committee in operation. So we're trying our best to be able to get through all of the applications and then start the reevaluation process for candidates that are on the waiting list. And so who are those stakeholders? What do the members of our admissions committee look like? Well, first, the primary volume of our admissions committee rests with the faculty. And that's actually a part of the ABA mandate, is that we have to have a faculty vote on admissions, on offers of admissions. And so most schools are able to satisfy that by having a faculty chair of the committee. But here at BC, the vast majority of our committee are actually faculty members. And what are they looking for? They want to get a sense of how your background and experiences can play out in their classroom opportunities. We also have members of our dynamic career services team who serve on our admissions committee, and what might they be looking for? Perhaps marketability, perhaps to get a sense of, who we are taking in the incoming class so that they can go out there and set the tone in the market, communicate the strengths that each class is bringing in to potential employers. We also have reference librarians who serve on our admissions committee. And again, this is another stakeholder in your success as a student. Our reference librarians help you fine tune your research and your writing skills. And they host lots of additional sessions and instructional classes to help you navigate through those things. We have members of our student services team, as well as, certainly last but not least, our very own admissions and financial aid team. All of those different stakeholders who are looking for, all of the things and looking through all of the things that you provided within your application. So now that you know who has read the applications and who will read them in the next iteration of our evaluation, I want to talk a little bit about the waitlist and how we use it. So first of all, the waitlist, in my opinion, is a key resource for anyone who's in a position like me in terms of managing enrollment management. The waitlist is comprised of a very talented pool of applicants, and it provides me and our team with the flexibility to maintain and reach all of our enrollment goals. This year, in terms of the targeted class size, we are set at about 240 to 250 students. The waitlist itself is very, very fluid. That means its volume and the frequency in which we draw from it depends on a number of variables, and certainly some of those things that I just mentioned at the top of this meeting in terms of application volume, the level of competition, the pandemic, as well as those weather and or environmental variables as well. In some years, we could draw from as many as about 100 or more students in a cycle, and others as few as 0 students from the waiting list to the incoming class. We use the waiting list to balance various characteristics of our class, perhaps, to increase diversity, to perhaps expand on our regional diversity. We're looking for professional experiences and all of the different components and characteristics that come with that. And we're looking at a variation of academic background. Yes, it is very popular for students to have a political science or a history background or an English major coming into law schools. But there's so many things that you can do with a law degree that we're not going to be limited by the popularity of particular majors. Yes, they are very present in every class, but we're looking for very dynamic students across the board. In terms of size, we use the waiting list to manage the size. I've already shared with you the targeted class size for BC Law. And so if I fall short of that number, I go directly to the waiting list. If I am above that targeted number, then we may not go to the waiting list immediately. So in terms of the quality factors of the class, like the medians, the LSAT medians and the GPA, we also use the waiting list to help us out on that front as well. And there are a number of factors that contribute to each decision that we reach. Sometimes it's on the student side where there perhaps might be flaws in the application, perhaps not a lot of attention, or perhaps a lack of attention to detail, or perhaps there are greater challenges in the story. Perhaps it's the tone, perhaps the message doesn't resonate, or perhaps the things that we are learning in the application materials leave more questions than they do answers. All of those things are controlled on the student side, on your side of the table. But there are also some factors that are outside of your control. Sometimes, we're just looking to get a deeper sense of your background. And other times we just need additional space to be able to manage the process. And so we need to take a step back from it a bit. But through all of this, what I think is important is the waiting list gives you a unique opportunity to really demonstrate your interest and to exercise your best professional judgment, right? I mentioned to you that the process was fluid. And with that, using your best professional judgment, perhaps you may not reach out to us as open and as willing and as much as we love to have all of the updates and things that you provide. Perhaps you realize that, we do have a waiting list. We do have admitted students. We do have other students who have to go through the evaluation process as well. And we may not be able to get on the phone with you, twice in a week, or, perhaps you don't email us every other day, right? These are just, egregious examples. But of course, you're not going to do that, right? Because you want to give us and whatever schools that you're thinking about the space to be able to do the things that they need to, and to be able to engage in a way that is meaningful for both sides. So let's talk a little bit about the process. The BC Law waiting list is unranked. And with that in mind, the time frame and the timeline in which we go to the waiting list, it varies from year to year. But one thing that is consistent is that we continuously reevaluate candidates on the waiting list throughout the cycle starting basically in early to mid-March, throughout the rest of the cycle. We constantly reevaluate, taking those applications back to the committee and seeing if we get to a different decision. What I'd love to do, and this is the first step to that, is provide periodic updates to the group throughout the rest of the cycle. Ideally, that might look something like this. Maybe once a month, we do a waitlist webinar, or maybe in lieu of a waitlist webinar, we directly send out a message that gives you an update on where we are. And the information that we would share in that instance, which I'm not in a position to share now because the deposit season is just opening. And so we're not in that space right now. But in the future, once we get past this month, once we get past March, some of that information might include whether or not our, offers came back strong or not as strong, right? And if they come back strong, that might mean that we may not be able to immediately pull from the waiting list. If we still have space and room, then my message might be completely different. It may be a heads up that we are going to our waiting list. And to you, that may be a signal for you to make sure that you have updated your application. And I'll talk a little bit about ways that you can update your application. And it becomes really important that you use those mechanisms because they're going to help us navigate and make sure that we're able to match any of those updates up with your application. The other thing that I would say about this time period is that you have to keep us informed of your plans. If in fact, another option becomes available to you and you want to take advantage of that, please tell us. That again speaks to the fluidity that I mentioned in terms of the waiting list. But it is important that we are looking at and constantly reevaluating people who are really interested in being a part of the community. And if you have made a decision to go somewhere else, just let us know. Be kind to your fellow classmate who might still be waiting and who might still want the opportunity. And so now I want to talk a little bit about ways in which you can enhance your chances of receiving an offer from the waiting list. First, I have to remind you that given the current conditions that are plaguing the entire country and are plaguing the entire world, we cannot host you on campus. We've eliminated the opportunity for you to visit on campus. A part of that is a university mandate, but that university mandate is also guided by our state. And so we cannot accommodate visitors to our campus. And this is for your safety and for ours. A little bit later in the conversation, Kim will share some information and resources in which you can use and navigate to learn more about the community. But I have to reiterate that we cannot welcome you to campus simply because of the circumstances in which we are currently in. But in thinking about ways in which you can enhance your chances of getting off the waiting list, first and foremost, my advice would be to be sincere. Don't go off into a space where you are telling us what you think we want to hear. What I want to hear is the truth. I want to know where your flexibilities are. I want to know if BC is your top choice, then feel free, tell us that. But you don't have to tell us that. I know the nature of an admission cycle. I know you're applying to multiple schools. And so you don't have to take that approach. If we are your number one choice, tell us that. If you are, will, deposit as soon as you get an offer, tell us that, but mean it. Because when we go through this process, we are going to be looking to pull those pieces together. The later we get in the cycle, the less time we have to be able to, make sure that your onboarding experience is a successful one and that we can make sure that you have all of the tools that are needed. And so the later we get in the cycle, the less time we have for those things to happen. So I certainly, if you are in a position to be able to accept the offer, if you get an offer, then tell us the truth so that we can identify you and so that we can make the right decision. Now, I know that many of you, especially based upon some of the things I said earlier, would like to provide updates for your application. And so what do those updates look like and how can you transfer them to us? So we have developed a tool on our end that enables us to streamline all of the supplemental materials that you may be interested in sending us. I imagine a member of my team has placed that in the chat right now, but we have a waitlist document upload form. And what that does is if you have additional letters of recommendation, or perhaps you decide, I'm really interested in BC, I know someone who can speak to my strengths, and I want to tailor that letter specifically to BC, you can have that person complete the form and send it directly through that waitlist document form. Perhaps you have a letter of continued interest. Feel free, again, select that form, upload it, and we will get it here and we'll be able to update that with your application. Or perhaps there have been some material changes to your work experiences, your leadership, or opportunities where you have volunteered. In all of those instances, if you want to update your resume, and again, where there's been a material change, again, feel free to upload that document through the form so that we can streamline that process. The other thing that you can do while you are trying to increase your chances is do your research. Get familiar with the community. Know your finances. If you need significant financial support, that's not a common characteristic generally associated with the waiting list. And if you don't have an alternative plan, or if you don't want to borrow money or you are debt averse, it might be a difficult exchange that you want to have if you are debt averse and you are thinking about law school and you are on the waiting list, because there are not a lot of times a lot of resources. For the first time in my years here at BC, we were able to provide scholarship assistance throughout the summer for candidates who are on the waiting list. And part of that was in part to our alums who were supporting the law school during challenging times. You know, we didn't know how we were going to be able to operate. And so we called upon the alumni to help us and to support us. And through those efforts, we were able to provide the vast majority of our students who joined us as 1L students with scholarship opportunities. In fact, it was somewhere to the tune in upwards of 95 to 97% of the incoming class. Again, that's not a normal characteristic. So I want you to know your finances. I want you to become familiar with what it means to transition to a law school from the waiting list. Of course, if we do have any resources available, we're going to share that with you when we are presenting you with an offer. But I also want you to be aware that it is not commonplace for there to be substantial scholarship opportunities when you do come in off of the waiting list. Two other thoughts, and one is to consider retaking the admissions entrance exam, whether it's the LSAT or the GRE, right? Once it is established that you are a member of the waiting list, again, we constantly reevaluate that. And so if there are any material changes, i.e., your final grades come in, or you've just recently finished a master's program, or you've retaken an admissions entrance exam, all of those things could be helpful in conveying to any admissions committee, including ours, your level of interest in our community. And then the final thing that I would say is to engage in virtual opportunities that are available. Right now, every Monday and Wednesday at 12 noon Eastern Standard, our student ambassadors are offering a coffee chat where you can get to learn more about them, learn about the community. And if you haven't had the opportunity to attend one of our information sessions, we basically do them every other week or twice a month. And we'll do that through March, and then we'll shift gears a little bit. So again, these are ways that you can engage and learn more about the community while we're under this period where we have restrictions on space. So generally speaking, there are two things, with all of that information in mind, there are two things that I am looking for once all of those previous variables have been considered. One is, are you capable of succeeding and or thriving in this community? And then ultimately, number two, will you attend? So those are the two big pieces that we are trying to figure out. And all of those examples and all of those mechanisms that I've just provided can help us get there. So now let's take it a step further. So what happens if you are admitted to the law school? As I just mentioned, if funds are available, they will accompany the offer. Generally, for candidates who are admitted to the law school from the waiting list, generally we try to provide a week, but as we get further and further into the cycle, certainly over the summer, that time period can be cut down to as little as 48 hours. And so I wanted to make that known because I think that does require a certain level of readiness for you to be able to accept that offer. Now, our seat deposit is $1,000. It is non-refundable, and it is payable online via credit card. For those who may be experiencing hardships, we do have waivers available, but those waivers are evaluated on a case-by-case basis. And if a waiver is granted, we require a binding agreement that you will be matriculating to Boston College, that you will withdraw all other applications, that you will keep us aware and up to date if any character and fitness, any of your responses to the character and fitness section of your applications change, and we would be expecting you for the next cycle. So I know that that was a lot of information, but since we are talking about, what are the next steps if offered admission to the law school, I'm going to turn it over to Kim so that Kim can help us continue to navigate that conversation and shed light on just how, what are the resources and mechanisms of transitioning to Boston.
Excellent. Thank you, Dean McShay. And Dean McShay is absolutely right that it will be important for you to be able to let us know fairly quickly how what your intent is to enroll. But let me just talk a little bit about some important logistics when considering transitioning to Boston. And so first and foremost, housing is always certainly an important consideration and one that is quite necessary if you're coming from out of state. If you're local, you may even want to consider commuting to the law school. You could save money and maybe just check things out and things like that before you commit to an apartment. But if you're coming from out of state or far away, we do not have any on-campus housing. However, we do have a lot of resources in place to assist students. The law school campus, we're located in Newton. And Newton is a suburb about 6 miles from downtown Boston, but we're also located about a mile from our Chestnut Hill campus. And the Chestnut Hill campus is where our undergrad and our other graduate schools reside. On that campus, we have an Office of Residential Life, and they assist both undergrad and graduate students in their search for off-campus housing. They maintain a database that will have current listings. They also have a thing called a roommate locator, roommate finder. That actually is quite helpful because you could put in your information and say if you're looking for a roommate, you found an apartment, or you are someone just don't have an apartment, but you're just looking for a place. And that is for just the BC community. They also provide on this website useful information about Boston, about leases, about the area. So it's really good to check it out. And they also sponsor every year a graduate housing fair. This year, the fair will be virtual and it will be on Friday, June 11th from 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. And information will be on their website as well as our website. Another great resource we have for admitted students is a Facebook group. It's a closed group and each class has their own Facebook group. However, we always allow current BC law students to join, and they're so helpful in answering questions about housing and a variety of matters. But a lot of times they too may have a room in an apartment, or they know a fellow law student who has a room. So there's a lot of very ways in which that you can secure housing. We produce and update every year a 1L guidebook. And this guidebook is a fabulous reference, and it has chapter by chapter on different topics, one of which is housing. And it also indicates where students live. So typically students will live in the Brighton, Allston, Brookline area, Watertown. And for those of you who are unfamiliar right now with Boston, it may make no sense. However, it's your job and is to kind of educate yourself, to kind of familiarize yourself with the area so that you can get a sense of where a good place to live. And so those particular towns or cities, or suburbs of Boston that I mentioned, They're really only a couple miles away. And so it's, how do you get there? Well, BC has a really good shuttle bus system. And so you can go on the Parking and Transportation website and check that out. They also have a thing called Translock, so you can actually follow buses. The law students many years ago got the administration to have express shuttle buses from a particular MBTA reservoir stop over to the law school. And so that's a convenient way for law students to be able to get to the law school early in the morning or in the afternoon and bypass the BC Chestnut Hill campus. So that's a direct shuttle bus. And again, there's a whole host of different shuttles that the Parking and Transportation oversee. We kind of similarly, we get asked the question a lot, do I need a car and should I bring a car to campus? And that's a personal choice, but I will say that having a car is certainly convenient, but is more expensive. You are required to have a parking sticker on the BC campus. And in some neighborhoods, you have to have a parking sticker in order to park there. And in some neighborhoods, like in Brookline, you can't park overnight. So then that requires you to rent a space. Again, it's your choice, but it is more expensive. And it's something that maybe if you do have a car, you want to bring a car, maybe bring it second semester and acclimate yourself first to being in Boston. And certainly, yes, Boston drivers are notorious drivers. So it's something just to, kind of think about if you're not really that familiar with driving A in snow or B in city traffic. And as Dean McShay did mention, the campus is currently closed. So what do we have available for admitted students just to kind of check us out and kick the tires? We have the Dean's Message, which is you can watch a video and listen to Dean Rougeau talk about the law school. We also have video archives. So it's alums talking about and faculty and talking about BC law. We do have a Periscope tour that was done about 5 years ago. Current students created this tour. However, we are putting in the chat today. It's not fully launched yet, but it is a brand new campus tour that is just been completed. And we're pretty excited about it because I think it'll give you a good sense and feel of what BC Law, the campus is like, and also the community. So what if you're not offered admission and to BC Law and your goal is to become a lawyer? Then we suggest you go to that school where you feel that you can thrive best. Another option would be to wait a year and get some experience under your belt and to reapply. We do have applicants who do reapply and have been successful the second or possibly third time around. You may also consider applying as a transfer student. Our transfer application is open and it opens typically, in January, and it is a smaller pool. The factors we do consider for students who want to transfer are the following. Would be your 1L performance, how well you did your first year. Getting faculty, 1L faculty to recommend you, sending us a letter of recommendation, and your marketability and your reasons for wanting to transfer. Sometimes it makes sense. You want to be closer to family. You want to be have access to a broader market, or the community and the alumni network that BC Law can provide. So those are just some of the things that you will want to consider. We really do suggest checking us out on the website. I know there's a lot of YouTube videos, but also I want to mention too that our law students are fabulous in what they produce is a BC Law Impact, and they just write about a lot of different topics. I guess there was one recently about housing. Dan Riley produced that. Just the OCI, the interview process. So a variety of different topics around there. So check out the BC Law Impact blog. And so at this point, Dean McShay, I think we're probably ready for some Q&A and do that.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. And thanks for sharing all of that information. I know that a number of questions have been coming through. And maybe we can do it this way. Can a member of the admissions team kind of filter those out to us and we'll answer them?
Sure, Dean McShay, I'd be happy to do that if you would mind giving me 1 second to upload that form.
Awesome. Thank you. I know.
Well, there's one right here, Dean McShay.
What happened?
No, I was just going to say there was one question about the wait list. Or if for applicants who are accepted off the wait list, are they considered for merit scholarship?
It is my hope that we'll be able to continue with that. Again, last year was the first time that we were able, at least in the almost 6 years that I have been here, it was the first time that we were in a position to offer merit-based aid to students who were admitted later in the cycle. And I think we were able to do it throughout the cycle last year. Generally speaking, I have a budget, I spend that budget, and usually by the second deposit deadline, that budget is spent. And, you know, if we do get additional funds, then I use those funds to award to candidates who we admit later in the cycle. Last year was an anomaly in my experience here, and so we were able to continue it throughout. I anticipate we may be in a similar position again this year, but I don't know that with 100% certainty. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Kim. And Dean McShay, our first question is basically, how does the community go about choosing which students get off the wait list?
It's a great question. And I think I touched on this a little bit earlier in my comments, but we reevaluate candidates on the waiting list. And what I mean by that is as we go through the cycle, we are learning more about our applicant pool. We're learning more about the admit volume. So how many seats do we actually have available based upon who we have admitted? And then, which is right now, we're starting to get into a space where we're going to begin releasing scholarship decisions pretty soon. And then we've already started receiving deposits and we haven't even done our scholarship process yet. And so, you know, there are components of that that make me a little bit nervous in that, you know, we don't have any intentions on cutting the size of our class. And so we're on track to make our to meet our enrollment targets. But there are a variety of different variables there. I think where we typically see the most movement is around our deposit deadlines. The first deposit, which is April 15th, the second deposit, which is May 15th, which I stress the May because it is earlier than most schools. And the reason that we do set it a little bit earlier, because we do a lot of work of really kind of bringing our admitted students into the fold. And certainly since right now we're in this kind of hybrid world where it's, you know, virtual in terms of our interactions, we have the opportunity to bring you into the town hall meetings, to bring you into different programs and things that we're having. And all of those things are just going to continue to help you understand the dynamic of the community, you know, learn about additional resources. So again, it's just setting you up for success. So we get that process started a little bit quickly here. Another reason why it's a little bit earlier, because we traditionally don't see a lot of melt. in terms of when students get admitted and they pay their deposit, we don't see a whole lot of students then walk away from that decision. And so again, it gives us a unique opportunity to really start, building community very early in our process. But with that in mind, I typically see the greatest volume of movement around those deadlines because that gives us a direct sense of what our commitments are. If we've hit our enrollment targets, we may be slow or maybe not go to the waiting list as heavily as we might normally. If we miss those enrollment targets, we might go to the waiting list very heavy. It is a science, it is an art, and we have certainly, as every law school in the country has, we've certainly had a number of curveballs thrown our way, right? And so all of those things play out. So I hope that's helpful in my response.
Dean McShay. And our next question is for Director Gardner, Kim. The question is, tell us about the transfer process if they are not removed from the waitlist.
Sure. So as I said, we've had, it can vary on the transfer amount. That has been as little as 7 and up to 18 or 19 or 20. So that kind of fluctuates, and it kind of goes with Dean McShay's reference to the enrollment process, the enrollment management during the course of the summer. But certainly we welcome students if they are still very much interested in us to apply as a transfer. Do the best you can, really work hard. Show us that you get some top grades and that you get to know a faculty member, because that's going to be important for them to then tell us about you. And also having we do ask not so much your similar to your personal statement, but a statement of interest for us. So that's where it can get personal and show us and tell us how how interested you are and why. But we do, when I say it's smaller, it is a smaller pool, because transferring can be, sometimes it's not, tricky isn't the word, but it can have its challenges, especially if you're unfamiliar with a particular city, or it just can have some challenges. So I think it's great. We're always happy to talk to students who are interested in the transfer process one-on-one.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. Certainly. Dean McShay, would you mind answering this question about what the waitlist means for international students, such as those with TPS status? Effectively a two-part question: for general international students, one, and the second part being for those who may have certain circumstances.
So the admissions committee is not taking your status or your citizenship status into consideration for the admissions decision. So it doesn't impact kind of that component of the evaluation. Where it tends to affect international students the most is the time frame in which they are given a decision. Is there enough time to, meet all of the requirements that have been set forth? Is it enough time to develop an affidavit of support? Is it enough time to get an appointment with the consulate? So all of it really tends to affect more on the making the decision to accept the offer as opposed to the decision of getting the offer. Again, I think timing becomes a bigger and bigger player in that process the longer you wait on the waiting list. But in terms of the evaluation of the application, that is not where you really see that come into play. You do see it come into play on the making the decision to accept the offer. All of our students, regardless of citizenship or any other dynamic aspect of someone's background, all students who are admitted to BC Law are considered for merit-based aid. So whether you are a US citizen or not, if you qualify for merit-based aid and we have merit-based aid available, you will receive merit-based aid. And for those who are wondering kind of what does that range look like, our average scholarship is about $21,500. And I hope that it will go up, but our average scholarship is around $21,500. And scholarships range from, for students who receive scholarships, they range from about 5,000 all the way up to generally about 45 to 50,000 per year. But we do have some special programs such as our Public Service Scholars Program, where it is a full tuition opportunity. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Dean McShay. Very insightful. And the next question comes from our Q&A session. The question is, can admitted students participate in BC's OCI process in August?
I'm assuming you were referring to transfers.
Yes, admitted transfer students.
Yeah,
Okay.
and you know what, can I take that one? Because that's exactly what I was meaning about how it can be tricky. And so the tricky piece is, and who knows, and just for those who may be unfamiliar with the acronym, OCI is on-campus interviewing, and it's for second and third year students. It typically happens in the fall, but because of COVID, it happened this year in the springtime or January semester, the second semester. So, but who knows if they're going to go back to the fall or just leave it as is. Do not know that. But that's where it can be tricky, because the timing of your interviews that you get from your 1L institution, and are you going to get the, like, how do you transfer or get those interviews tagged over to BC? All students, once they're accepted and deposited, will sit down and have a one-on-one with our BC Career Services team, and there is a dedicated advisor in our office that will, in the Career Services office, that will service those students and help with that transition. But that's why it's really important to, if you want to transfer, to do it earlier, meaning like June or early July, because you don't want to start waiting and miss our deadlines for OCI.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. And here's a question from Caroline, who writes in. They mentioned that they read in BC Law's fact and figures sheet that the fall 2020 entering class size was 255. Dean McShay, you mentioned earlier that the target size for this year is 240 to 250. Caroline is curious as to why it varies each year and why the fall 2020 entering class was a larger class size.
Yeah, excellent question. So, I mean, again, this is an art and a science, right? And in our best day, we can't 100% predict human behavior, right? And so our target size for the last couple of years has been 240 to 250. And what that is basically saying, the university is signaling to the law school, and the law school is responding, is that we want you to stay around the same size. We're not forcing you to become a school of 280 or 290 or 300, and we're not telling you to be a small school of 200 or 180, right? So in essence, we are basically staying the same. There are years where you come in, and there's a range associated with that. So there are years where you may be a couple of students under. Of course, every enrollment person's dream is to come just a few over, and that's what we did there. So that wasn't a shift in terms, that wasn't a material shift in kind of our philosophy of how we wanted to approach the learning experience. It was simply just a few more students that we couldn't say no to, who are a part of the community and who are thriving in the community. But it's also, again, this is a part of that mechanism that I mentioned a little bit earlier, and that is, at what number do you, how many do you admit to get your class size, and what are the variables that are present in the prospective student's situation that will either enable them to accept or not accept your offer, right? We can't control any of those variables. I have a general sense of how many students we need to admit to get to fill a class, but at the end of the day, those variables that are affecting your day-to-day experiences really do, take on the weight of how you behave in that situation. So I hope that's helpful, Caroline.
And as a follow-up from another person with the very same question, is there a possibility, Dean McShay, that we might increase the class size for this fall?
Not much, not significantly. It will be in the height of that target is 250. I mean, if we come in 2, 3, 4 students over, no one's going to be upset. If I come in 15 students over, absolutely. The faculty were like, I don't have enough hours in my day to sit down with each student and, review and give feedback to every paper, right? So there really becomes a challenge of quality when you bring in significantly larger classes. I mean, I think we do have the elasticity to be able to hit like 270, but that is not the direction that our dean or our faculty want us to go into. And so we maintain the 240 to 250 round.
Thank you, Dean McShay. Here's a question from Lauren. Lauren writes, Dean McShay mentioned earlier that applicant rates have increased 30% from last year. Is this statistic based on the increase of total applications received at each school, or the total number of students applying to law schools across the board?
Oh, that's an excellent question. The answer is the latter. It is a function of the total amount of applicants who are applying to law schools across the U.S., right? Remember that there are also Canadian schools who are a part of the LSAC process, the Law School Admissions Council. So there are U.S. and Canadian schools there, but in the U.S., in terms of U.S. applicants, we are seeing an uptick in upwards of 30%. Now, that in this year is a little bit unique because we are seeing very similar upticks at the individual school level as well. And that range is pretty wide, depending on the region, depending upon the amount of feeders. We are in New England, and New England is a tremendous feeder for all things education. And in this region has the highest percentage increase of people who are attracted to the schools here, which means that it's not surpassing it in volume because there are larger volume places. Like New York is significantly bigger than Boston. LA is significantly bigger than Boston, but we have so many colleges and students that are here in this landscape. I think Boston has over 250,000 students in the metro area alone. Not to mention all of the additional colleges and universities that are on the outer skirts of the metropolitan areas. So it has a high volume of students, and we're also a part of a major city, a major background, so applications are up.
Great, thank you. Let's see, and this question goes to Kim. Kim, Elizabeth asks, how does BC Law help acclimate waitlisted students who are accepted off the waitlist to a new academic and social community, especially on a shortened time frame?
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, I was typing that answer. So as I mentioned, we do have a career service staff member who specifically works directly with transfer students on that, the career job aspect. But we also have, for all students and also for specifically targeted transfer students, a new student committee. And on that committee are current law students who some were transfer students. So that person becomes like their mentor. And so it's great because then they were once that newly minted transfer student, and now they can help mentor and guide and answer any questions, as can any of our either law students or student ambassadors. So, but specifically, I think that's a great one-on-one. Non-COVID times, we used to have a transfer lunch, and the transfers could all get to meet each other and meet some faculty members. But we really do try to fold them in right away.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate that. And we have a question from the follow-up list. The question really is, Sean, if you don't, Dean McShay, if you don't mind, how can an applicant on the wait list demonstrate their interest really without going on a campus tour because of the pandemic?
Certainly kind of reiterating some of those components from our earlier comments. Additional letters of recommendation, updates to your material, updates to your resume, letters of continued interest. And these don't have to be, thought-provoking, you spent 18 hours to create it. I mean, it's just being honest and sincere with us, letting us know, what you're thinking, letting us know kind of what your circumstances are. And honestly, if we can help in those instances and we have the space to, those are the things that resonate with us, right? Because we would be in the mode of kind of filling the class. And there are a variety of things that we are looking for, right? And I don't know those things yet, right? Because I'm not at the point where we are, getting our deposits in and the seats are being completely consumed. We have a couple of deposits. We haven't even released scholarships yet. What typically happens is when I start to release scholarships, then I start to see deposits start to flow in pretty heavily. And so we usually get indications of what the first deposit will look like, kind of leading a week or two outside of that deadline, because we start to see deposits come in a little bit more heavily. And then on the night before, the day before, we usually come into a completely different outlook than when we started that day. And I think, again, it's just a part of students navigating this application process. And certainly if you're applying to multiple schools, it becomes a real job in itself to manage all the different timelines and commitments that are out there. And
if I could just add, Dean McShay, this process can go not only through the spring, but all through the summer, and go up to the first day of class. So, and the reason also being is that some candidates are multiple deposited, and so that can create just this, uncertainty. But if you can let us know, say it's now beginning of August, and that you can hang in there till like the, August 15th or August 1st, or till the first day of classes, that also can be helpful information for us. Because as we know, other schools may go to their wait list, which then can affect our class size. So it is a fluid process. There are a lot of things that sometimes are out of our control, and that we need to kind of just sometimes wait and see. And right, Dean McShay, we've been there.
Absolutely.
Yes. So
20 years in, I've kind of seen enough.
We don't have that crystal ball, but we do the best with our information, our past information that we have, and but each year is different. Certainly, this year was last year was certainly very different, and this year could be very different as well. We're not sure.
Yeah, the only final thing that I will add on this "what can you do" piece, I have to reiterate something I said earlier, and that is use your best professional judgment. Be mindful of people's time. Be mindful of, what your needs are as well, and make sure that, if you do a meeting or something of that nature at some point throughout the cycle, that you've really kind of thought about the questions that are really important to you so that we can get you those answers. FaceTime in itself is not necessarily helpful, right? Because I've seen a lot of people really show me things that made me kind of second guess, our decision to place someone on the waiting list. So again, please use your best professional judgment as you navigate this process. It's a touchy process. Every school goes about it very differently. We're doing our best to make ourselves available, to get information to you, and to give you a vehicle in which you can communicate really important stuff to us. Use all of those opportunities that are necessary for you to be comfortable with where you are, and to be comfortable with the decision that you have made to either stay active or to move on, right? But I cannot stress to you enough how much that professional judgment plays into this process. So be mindful. I have this thing, this kind of a rite of passage. I don't know why Daniel calls me Dean McShay, but I do understand why the students call me Dean McShay. And usually I have the opportunity to say students' names as they cross the stage. And when I hear them say Dean McShay after that, I absolutely always tell them, no, you call me by my first name. So then when a prospective student calls me by my first name, I'm all thrown off because I'm like, how long did I meet you? So again, those are just kind of general, generic, kind of tips about just using your best professional judgment as you kind of enter into these relationships, these exchanges with schools across the board. Of all of the schools that I have worked for, and this is the 5th school where I've been an administrator, I have not worked at one that has been so open and so supportive of getting this type of information to candidates. And so I hope you are benefiting from the information that we're sharing here. So thank you.
Thank you, Dean McShay. I appreciate that. Here's a question about a waitlisted candidate. They're asking if they were to receive an offer from us later on this cycle, would they be eligible to request a deferral?
Honestly, that varies with the cycle. I mean, anyone is eligible to request a deferral. If we get to a point where, let's say, I have more students than I care to have that are already deferred to the next year, then we might, be a little bit, more rigid with it. But, the deferral population is a very, very small population. And on average, we are probably talking about anywhere from about 10 to 12 students. That's out of 250 students or so. So it's usually not a big population, and we try to accommodate most students who request a deferral as best we can. It is evaluated on a per case basis or on an individual basis. And so the reasons behind that really do matter. And if it is an instance where we do not grant the deferral, then you have additional options. You can apply again the next cycle, and if your plans were flexible, maybe you do ultimately matriculate. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, Dean McShay. That seems to be it from the questions. And Kim, Dean McShay.
I was just going to say we have 2 of our law students with us today. So if you have any questions for John or Buki, feel free to put them in the chat.
I actually see one that John was about. Were you about to reply to that, John? So can I kick this question to either one of you or both of you? What was the deciding factor for you in choosing BC Law? You're on the record here, so I'm joking. Go ahead.
Yeah, absolutely, Dean McShay. When it came down to it, I chose BC Law because of the community. Law school, no matter where you go, is it's going to be tough. Spoiler alert, it will be stressful at times. You're going to be putting in long hours. That said, it is all better when you are surrounded by a group of people who aren't just smart and motivated, but also compassionate and really care for you. And I think that's been my experience at BC Law, and I think almost every student can say the same. We've been referred to as the Disneyland of law schools, which I love. And I like to say on tours that we might not be the happiest place on earth, but I do think we're the happiest law school on earth because people from our administration to our alumni base to our faculty to current students really care about one another. And that shows in our daily interactions.
Awesome. Anything to add, Buki, or?
I would say my experience has been very similar. Just my time here, I had my classmates would ask me, "Why are you here? Like, you're in California." And I would say when I visited this BC at Administration's Day, I really liked the current students I talked to, and I felt that I could see myself at the school. I think that's a big factor when considering different schools. Can you see yourself being friends with the current students there, and your different interactions with the staff and deans? I thought all my interactions were very positive, so it's mainly why I chose BC.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you all. I see that we have responded to all the questions in there. So team, you're amazing. Thank you so much for the participants here. Thank you so much for being with us. I appreciate you taking the time. I hope this information was helpful for you along your journey. Again, please take advantage of the opportunities that we have provided. Make sure if you do have updates to your application, you upload them. You can look through the status checker and you can find the form there. It is built into your account because of your status. So you can upload documents by visiting the application status checker and adding an update to your resume or letter of continued interest. You can do that all there. Thank you so much for your time. It's been wonderful. Have a wonderful day. Stay safe. Take care. Bye-bye. Thanks, everyone.